Pink Cloud Radio 73. In this whole thing, the vibration of sensitivity and everything else that comes, and really what this whole ability is. The ability to be psychic, the ability to be all these things, magical or not. Everything that comes together in this whole thing, really. Because it really is about that. About the Death King presentation, about the open knife that I've been, about everything that's been captured, really. The interlude that I was for a time, or catalyst, or leading people to a catalyst, and everything else in between, from the key that I've been. Because it all comes back to this stuff. It all comes back to, I'm one of those people who are honest and will not just act insufferable when told something honestly. Only those that are so one-sided that it's made to be my reason to. Those are not necessarily both sides of the picture. As people call it, both sides. Well, there's two sides to a picture. There's both sides to a picture. No, there's not. There's more than that. So if you were totally honest with me, then I gotta go. And not in that way of like, I gotta escape this. No, it's more that, like, at certain times, you can have your honesty, but it may not be the truth. There's a big difference with you being honest, and you being honest with yourself. Sometimes people's honesty just shines through as sarcasm and cynicism, as self-defense, as a self-defense mechanism. Well, you're being honest, but you're not being honest with yourself. You're just being honest about your sass, about your total, exuberance to just express it. That's your honesty. Well, that's not much honesty. That's why I don't really... There's a lot of people that many people respect that are totally like that I have no respect for. That I'm just like, I'd rather be drenched in blood. Meaning that I'd rather be dead than have to deal with that. That's the kind of person you respect. Somebody who's not honest with themselves. Okay? And nothing to do with religion. It's just like with The Exorcist. The Exorcist has little to do with religion. In fact, if you look at it from a different point of view, it's actually about the fight between good and evil, so to speak. But even the fight of good and evil has been alluded to in many ways, in many forms, spiritually wise, which means that what we want to fight sometimes, people kind of look at it that way. They'll say, like, they're not religious, so they're not going to look at it's not just good and evil, But yet, people will say all the time, I pick the lesser two evils. Well, I say, if you pick the lesser two evils, explain to me what the bigger evil is. I don't see a difference. That's all I'm going to say, because literally, you got to explain to me what that bigger evil can do. Because what I can see from this evil that's already in power is, it's going to lead to that same thing. It's going to lead to an evil that I see that I don't like. Like I said, I'm one of those people who are honest and will not just act insufferable when told something honestly. It's true, Now, it doesn't mean I won't have a response, and I will be like, totally calm and totally understanding. Because, of course, I won't be totally understanding, because there's a point of justice when people use honesty. They don't use it just to say it. They use it at a point where they can't deal with something anymore as it is. So they're totally honest about something when they should have been honest earlier. So that's the difference. I won't be insufferable about it, but there'll be nothing else I can do except move on with my life. And sometimes that'll be about, hey, I gotta move on, I can't talk to you, or blah blah blah. Or I may try to fix it in a different way where it doesn't make sense to somebody. They're like, well, why didn't they talk to me? Because you didn't want to talk. It's pretty useless to talk to somebody if they're not able to at least deal with that honesty early on, too. They're the ones suffering with not dealing with that honesty, I didn't make them suffer because I want them to be honest. I'm not a person who sits here going, man, I like when people are not honest with themselves. I stay around them so they won't be honest with themselves. No, I don't. I actually stay around people if they want to be honest. If they are being honest, and a lot of times they are, even in their self-defense of not dealing with the truth, then they're still being honest. Other times, it doesn't feel like that anymore. It feels like they're just trying to antagonize and start problems. There you go. I already have enough problems in my life. If I wanted you to start problems in my life, I would ask you. Now, if you don't agree with my personal views, that's fine. But, the science is still there just as much. But, of course, the centrifuge of most people's beliefs is that, it's a one-sidedness, that there has to be one answer. There is, but there's also many answers. That's the difference. And most people don't want those other answers known because those other answers are infinite, meaning that they can be exploratory even more so than the ones that are used. The economic welfare, the economic investments, and everything else made Edison's project go forward. Edison's electricity go forward. It didn't make Tesla's because they didn't want to put money into his. So if that's the only reason to use a science or use an environment, use a society based on the leverage of what you can get back from it, then what's the point of the electricity at all? We don't even need electricity at that point because all we need is the money to come back to us. It's just another means to another end, It's the means to an end, and the end is getting the money back, and getting ourselves screwed by the government yet again. Don't need sex, and that's the one-sidedness, that those are not necessarily both sides of the picture. All we're being told is, well, look at this magnificent man right here, but let's forget about the investors that put the money in only to his project, not into Nikola Tesla's, because Tesla's didn't have money come back from it. It would just be free for everybody. Well, can't do that. Communism. And that's the label that people give it. Oh, you give anybody for free, communism. But not necessarily. The thing is, there are a lot of things for free in this world. And to label it bad, we might as well kill all animals. We might as well kill all the trees, everything in nature, because everything gives something for free. We might as well kill trees for giving us oxygen. That's the whole point of this. If we're going to kill everything that gives things for free and not give any investments and not care about them, no wonder nature's not going to survive. No wonder nature hasn't survived, because we don't want to give anything to anybody for free. We don't want anybody to have anything for free. We want to get something back from it. We can't. And that means, that's not even meaning you're God. That means you're something else. It's not a devil. It's not a God. It's something else. You want to be held capable of giving somebody something, but not for free. I don't know what that is. I don't know what label. I can't even say God or devil, because that'd be something else. A tyrant or a king. I wish I could use those labels, but they're not even close to what I have to say about that, because everybody sees the goodness in it. Yet, how can you see goodness in something like that? That's all I'm going to say about that. That's the one thing about being honest. You start figuring out what kind of honesty other people have. You start seeing the honesty that they carry. And it's not much. Basically because they don't want to worry about honesty. That's the whole point right there. Most people don't want to worry about the honesty, because if they worry about being honest, then they can't worry about themselves. Then they can't worry about using their own illusions of saying, I'm going to help people to get something in their return. Well, if you want to help people just to get something in your return, which is what you can do, and you can keep on saying as much as you want that you're doing it to help people, or help animals, or help the world, or help nature, but at the end of the day, you're still getting money there. You're still doing it for the investment of what you put in. There's a big difference, at looking at something and seeing the value in it, than in looking at something and seeing the value that you'll get. And that's not a one. Now, I'm not saying that's only the only two ways you can look at things. Of course not. I never looked at it either way, because it's kind of hard to look at things in that perspective for me. I wouldn't look at it that way, because that would almost put dirt over what the foundation was built on. Let's find the foundation first. Let's understand it. Let's see why it's all fucked up. That's pretty easy. It's pretty easy for me to see why it's fucked up. It's because most people want evil to be in power. So they never empower the idea that there could be good to take over. That's why people say the lesser two evils, because they never want to see a good person or a good action to be put forward. That's why they say, well, we'll have the less of two evils. Well, are you sure you have no other options? I'm not talking about the options that they're told. I'm talking about the options that you could find. You're sure there's no other options? But people don't want to look at that, because once you look at some other option, it's not about pessimism, because a lot of people can point that out. Like say, oh, you're so grim, Marcello. You're so pessimistic. Man, I wish it was that easy. Man, there are so many people pessimistic out there, especially the ones that say that to you. They're the most pessimistic because they want you to feel the same as them. How pessimistic can you be? You want to ignore my individual feeling, my individual right to feel the way I feel, and just call it pessimistic. That's all you want to do to it. So I changed to make you happy. Well, fuck you, sir. I'm doing this to make me happy, because that's the only thing I can do. Fuck you, sir, madame, and everybody else in this hand. It means that there is no way to see anything besides ourselves. But then, when other people use us to their advantage, they don't look at it that way. They say, well, no. You're just being, you think about yourself too much. And then they'll say something like that. You talk about yourself too much, Marcello. As if they never did. As if they never talked about themselves at all, Because there's not many interesting people out in the world. I mean, if you want to talk about each other, that's great. But have some interest then. You gotta have interest in the conversation, or else it's never gonna build, unless I bring up myself, and a little more about myself. Because if you don't want to talk about something entirely deeply, I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm gonna have to bring up myself. Too bad. Because you don't want to talk deeply. Well then, maybe we shouldn't talk. Got a wrong character to talk to. So both sides will be destroyed. Because I don't need a picture to show only two sides. Let's do 1 million. Let's do more than the universe can handle. No good deed goes unpunished. One of my favorites, everybody. It's true. Though it's hard to say, I'm not saying it's hard to say. No, it's hard to say because it's hard to feel it, It's hard to take it. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many people that say that, really. My brother does. My brother is what I took it from, actually, because he said it recently. No good deed goes unpunished. Of course, I wonder why. But then again, technically, it doesn't really go punished. Because if you think about it, I think nowadays especially, it's harder to punish a good deed. Especially if you do it out of nowhere. I take an example that I did the other week with my friend Charles. We were hanging out. He went up to this girl and guy, and you could see in the girl's eyes, and I'm not denying what he said because I felt it too, 100%. But the thing was, it wasn't his fight. But it wasn't her fight either, technically, because she already had ended it, and you could see it in her face that this guy was just on her and trying to get with her and trying to stay with her. Well, that's fine, you can do that. But the thing is, she's also being a weak person not because she's taking what he's saying, that's fine. Anybody can take what somebody's saying and just walk away from it. I'm not talking about walk away from it right away. You can listen to the whole thing and then decide after that, you know what, no thanks. And it's a quick thing, but most people don't want to do that part. That's too much work. But I want somebody who wants to do the dirt work, as I call it, because it is the dirt work. Like Sinead O'Connor ripping the Pope's picture. There you go. That's what you got to do in life. It's not about crystallizing an image of life. It's about understanding that there is no image of life unless you make it by yourself, not a picture that's done for you. This is the idea about no good deed going unpunished. You gotta do things off of what deed you want to take. Now, there's a difference. I kind of agree with this statement if it's taken to the consideration of how somebody thinks when they do something. So if you do something because you want it to be seen as a good deed, then yes, probably should go punished. Because if you're doing it for that reason, you're flaunting. I mean, it's not a worthwhile thing to do. If what it's based on is, I'm going to just do a good deed. I'd wish that more people who did those good deeds in that kind of thinking would get punished. Most of them don't. They get huge profits in return. So technically, there's a lot of people who are so stubborn to believe that they're doing so good, these people, that they'll defend them. Even though they know they're really doing bad, it doesn't matter. They've done some good there, and so they did a good deed, though. Well, if it's recognized as a good deed, that means they kind of thought of it that way, and they did it on purpose to make you defend him. That's the whole point. It wasn't for anything else. It wasn't for personal satisfaction. That's the whole point of all these good, no good deed goes unpunished. But the problem is that if everybody believes good deeds are bad deeds, then like somebody that actually has good intentions and good heart will not get respected. They'll get hated. Ah, boo, fuck you. I didn't do it for you guys. If you hate me for it, good. I wish you would hate me more. To want to, come out and make another story up like the lone gunman for JFK or something. But there's nothing like that nowadays. Most people don't even have balls to stand up when you're talking to them. They're not ballsy enough. And that's the whole fucking point. So no good deed goes unpunished. Well, if the only punishment I get is my reputation getting hurt, I don't give a damn. That's a good thing. I'd rather people not want to talk to me if my reputation was the only matter between us. Because what matter do we have between who I am as a personality, as a character, inside, the heart, the mind, the way I think, what I think about? If all that matters is the reputation that you see uncovered from me, between what you see and how you think because that means you've always thought that way. It's better off that you go then. It's better off that you punished my good deeds. I'd rather you punish my good deeds than be there and be wrinkled up and scared to do anything. I want somebody who's able to appear in front of me and not have any degree of sympathy and feel distracted from what they see in me. Because I'm here. If you want to see it as if I'm taking it from Alex Jones, I'm taking it from anybody around the world, go ahead. I could give a fuck less. Because everybody's built up from everybody else around them. You can't take that away. Everybody's built up from every system before us. You can't take that away. There's no individual here. So if you say I'm influenced from somebody else, good. So what? It doesn't mean you're right, because you're influenced by somebody else too that may be an idiot and just doing their job to get the money. So you're influenced by somebody who only does it for the money. So they could be blasphemous and tell lies all the time. And you're going to say, well, I believe this person. Well, you have a lot of foundation to build on now. More lies. What a wonderful person you are. Cheating people, oh, that's wonderful. That's what you plan to do? Nick it in the butt, everybody. So no good deed goes unpunished. Good. I want my good deeds to be punished. Because I want to be able to see the people that do it. There you go. So if you punish my good deeds, please do it directly when you see me. Because if you're that upset that you can't do something good, I don't want to be misunderstood. But you're going to misunderstand it anyway because you don't want to step forward and do something good. Not my fault. Not my fault, I don't need a charity organization to say that, And it isn't my fault because if it was, then I wouldn't be talking like this right now. I mean, I'm at an age where I would understand that a lot better. And I've done every single end of it. I've done the stupendous end where you see how people think in one way thinking, group think, and I've done it in the opposite way. And I've seen exactly where people end up. Nothing. They end up as nothing. Because if you think in groupthink, you're not being an individual. And if you think in the opposite way, you're treated like shit because you think in the opposite way. But then the people that actually don't even know how to think for themselves are in this shoveling pit of not wanting to do anything. So they completely outgrow their sympathies and their ties to everybody, but they don't try to grow into who they are as a person. They just ignore the rest and say, well, I can see how people look at those people, and I don't want to be like that. So they build it based on the reputation that's built in this kind of seeping pit where they're shoveled in. And they shovel themselves in, Basically, they dig their own graves. And I think that's what really is no good deed goes unpunished. It's not always about somebody inflicting pain on you. Sometimes it's just you doing it to yourself. I've done it to myself, but at times it was because I've done it to end friendships, and I didn't want anybody else to take the responsibility for me. So that's the whole point. And that's exactly what happened certain times where the friendships went bad. I was just like, I'm going to take responsibility even if I'm hated for it. Even if I'm, disregarded and, flaunted as some kind of torturous device. Because that's what happens sometimes, is that sometimes people use the antagonism of the well-being of somebody versus what they should do. And I think it's just the idea, people confuse being comfortable with being happy. It's not the same thing, And the proof is how people react to what I just said, good deeds. If they're going to punish good deeds, then like actual good deeds where they're not labeled as such until afterward, where it's thought about like that person did a good deed. People don't think beforehand, I'm going to do a good deed. They just do they just do it. They don't have any lingering doubts. They don't have any, but I'm not saying people don't think about something before they do it, because you have to. That's something else. That's something else entirely. I think in a lot of ways, sometimes people think the idea of thinking fast and just doing an action can help things. Not always. Because I thought fast so many times, never did anything still. So I've thought fast, gave answers fast, and nothing. Still nothing. That's fine, But it's because I'm not going to do anything when I know I could get attached. I'll do something if you want to stay there. But if you don't, well, then you're not prepared for anything. Don't, be scared. But don't be afraid. Be scared all you want. I'm scared too. But I'm more scared of losing you. And it may be something that can come so quickly in a relationship, but it's damn true. And that's why I feel so lost in the middle of nowhere, because I've lost so many people. So many people are gone from my life in that way. Not like lost death, but it's like death. Because it feels like they're gone, and that's it, And I didn't want to lose any of them, and they're gone. And that's what happened. And that's the ideal right there, right? But it's true, people confuse being comfortable with being happy. So then that's it, who wins over there? Well, the person that makes you comfortable. Obviously, it's not me, because I say the truth. And saying the truth is not something more people are comfortable with. Most people are comfortable with ignorance is bliss. Well, then that's where you need to go. You need to go with ignorance, because, I don't bleed ignorance. Meaning that I'll bleed for my death of truth. But you know what? Truth will not die with me. Truth will die with the people who are ignorant. That's who it's going to die with. Because they don't want to deal with the truth. And if you don't want to deal with the truth, you're going to die from it. And it doesn't mean you're going to die from it because if you don't face it. You're going to die from it because you don't face it. You don't face it at all. So it's going to hurt you, And it's not about, having somebody there with a strong arm, which is what most people believe, is that it's patriotism, is that these things can help you keep our strengths up, keep us united we stand, divided we fall. Well, it's too late. We're divided already. If we have to label everything and build everything off reputation alone, that doesn't show we're united. The fact that we have approval, disapproval, judgments, reputation, all these standards to live up to, it shows that we're not united at all. You're not united if you have to think those ways, if you have to use those tools to mimic the results of humankind, what they are and what they can't be. That's not being united at all. In fact, that's just basically the Roman Empire all over again. But it's fine, we could believe that it's not, but it is. It's the exact same thing, and it's the exact same reason that fell. The people decided to assimilate, so much so that it wasn't freedom anymore. It was their ideal, supposedly, but it wasn't their ideal that they built on their own. People in power did that. Of course, we don't want to believe that part, because we want to believe that we create all the legislation, all the rules and laws. Tell that to lobbyists that are bought off from every corporation, every bank, every conglomerate that's been built in the last 100, 20, 200 years. Tell that to them. that we protect their rights. Because we don't got any anymore. We don't have even defenses for our individual rights. But they can protect themselves over anything. We? Nothing. Go to jail for hacking and finding a rapist and putting him in jail, but getting a longer sentence because we actually hacked into a computer to find this rapist. But guess what? The rapist gets little years compared to the amount of scrutiny the person who hacked and found that person did. So there you go. Who's in the right now? Nobody. Nobody's in the right. But you gotta do wrongs to do right now too. And I don't even mean like wrong, right, wrong. No, I mean sometimes you have to do that because the people in power aren't going to allow people to do good things unless you do it in a wrong way. And that's why terrorist is a great label now, because it can be used for an idea, for a method, for the way you talk, for the way you think. Anything can be labeled a terrorist. Anything. A book. You could have any kind of individual free thought, and that's terrorist right there. You know, it's the whole idea of, we're not telling you what to think, we're telling you how to think. Well, that's not freedom. If you have to be told how to think, and you have to think a certain way on how you're thinking, that's not freedom. We could say it's freedom, we could believe it's freedom, but it's never gonna be freedom. Because it's been done before. And it never was freedom before, because the way they fell, you know. But we have to wait for that, because we don't want to, you know, take care of the problem right now. We want to be in the tar pits, like the Brea tar pits. We want to stay in the tar pits until finally it's gone. But they're not going to go away. They want that power. You think those people are just going to eliminate themselves and say, well, we changed our minds? I wish. You know, people like the easy way out. But the easy way out for most people is just being ignorant to it. It doesn't mean they don't know it exists. It doesn't mean they're not awake to reality. It means that they're ignorant to it. That's what I personally believe. And that's why they're comfortable with being, that's why they're being just comfortable is just enough. You know, they don't need to be happy, actually. Being comfortable is just enough. And I think that's what really is the payment off in what our society does. We'll give you this, but don't say anything about this. So it's the payoff method. And if you have to pay off people to keep a secret or so on and so forth, you're probably not a good built foundation of a society at all. And you're not a civilization at all, because you wouldn't have secrets. You wouldn't, because secrets create the ambition for lies. And it creates lies itself, because you're creating lies that will falsify what society knows, what the people know in general. If you're, you know, as I said, that's what happens right there. And I think God is a tool for persecution and for the enlightening qualities of powerful acceptance. Instead of solving problems, say, leave it to God. There we go. One of my favorites. Yet, people always do that. Say, leave it to God. But they don't like when we question God. When we say, he was supposed to do this, he didn't promise us anything, then we can't leave it to God. Yet everybody says, let's pray to God. I hope he takes care of these problems. Wait, but you can't question his authority, though. But you can leave it to God. But you can't say, he didn't make any promises to us. You know, but you can say, he didn't make any promises to us. Then why are we praying to him? He should make promises to us. He created us. If he's not going to make promises to us, it's pretty annoying. And it is. Because at the same time, that's what Mamina says all the time. He didn't make any promises to us. Then why are we leaving it to God? Why are we praying to him? Especially about these important issues. Why are we praying to him about them? He doesn't care. He doesn't even care enough to give us promises as individuals that we were created in his image. Well, shouldn't we have the same abilities as him then? We don't need to go to him for help. We don't. And we don't need to structure our life and ambitions and goals based around him, this so-called omnipresent being that doesn't do a damn shit of work. He may, like for example, he may have created a verse. This person may have created a verse, but he didn't do anything with it afterward. He just created the verse, and that was it. Well, that's not a very God person, And he has a lot of responsibility now. Why do you think there are less father figures now? Because they're just like the real God. They're not there. And that's what God reminds me of. Just another father figure right there that left. Got on drugs, drinking, did the whole thing, and had to leave. Ran away. Was abusive. Sounds like him. And see, that's the whole thing. There's no entitlement issue here. And there's no angst or anger against this person. There's the value judgment of, if you pray to him to fix these problems or to say, look over this, you can't say at the same time, he didn't promise us anything. So then why are you praying? If he didn't promise you anything, you have to have some reason to go to this person. In general, you can't just do this, this repetitive cycle based on nothing. You got to have some reason to keep on going back to it. And I think that's the thing that people don't understand when, like, John Pierre asks, hey, if he want, he got it, he's just like my real dad, When he says, like, if he was going to take responsibility, he should have. This is a lot he's done. He's created all this. He perpetuated the cycle that started this, which means he created the start of the cycle. If you're going to start a cycle, you have to end a cycle. But if he truly doesn't plan to, then there's truly no reason to pray to him about the issues that are going on at hand. Because he's not going to take responsibility for those either. He's going to blame us, even though, of course, this being created us. It doesn't matter. He's not going to take responsibility for the fact that he put us here. That's our fault. Yet somehow it's not our fault, because there's no thinking, there's no action without the creation. So, actually, that's not true. Whether it was evolution or creation or whatever, they could be both. It could be everything altogether built. But if somebody's not going to take responsibility for it, then there is no responsibility to be taken. And there is no responsibility to the fact that there is a creation at all. It means that, generally speaking, there could be a magnetic force. But it certainly doesn't give any debt to me. It's not indebted to me at all. And that's not a good sign. That's a bad sign right there. If that thing is not indebted to me for the creation that I give too in my lifetime. There's a lot more than the physical realm that I can satisfy. And I've been satisfying the spiritual realm as much as I can. And I think that's the difference, is that what people use to, I guess, debate or try to string apart or string together certain things, they'll always use the kind of ambitions or relentless agenda, of being honest, And that may not be honesty. That may be just the same kind of cynical sarcasm that always comes from people, especially when they don't want to deal with something. Their self-defense mechanism just starts up. And it's just like no good deed goes unpunished. Right there, that's the cycle of what most people don't want to deal with. So they'll always use no good deed goes unpunished. Okay. Well, that means that if you thought that way beforehand of somebody doing a good deed or you doing a good deed or whatever, if you thought beforehand about it, then that's what you're always going to treat it as. Whether you're the one who's hurting somebody that is doing a good deed, or whether you're doing a good deed and waiting to be punished. I, on the other hand, don't really care. Not to say it doesn't matter, because it does. I just showed how it mattered. I mean it in a way that I'm not going to stop being this way and be bitter about my experiences, for example. Because a lot of people may say, and I love this, the circumstances change who we are. No, not necessarily. It's the actions. It's what people do. It's never about the circumstances. The circumstances are a nice segue to eliminate responsibility. That's the big one. Because responsibility, most people don't want to take. As Sartre said, that's why God was created, so that people wouldn't have to take responsibility. That's why people say, leave it to God. Yeah, but God didn't make us any promises. Why should we leave it to God? He doesn't even make promises, this guy. I don't want to leave it to a person that doesn't make promises to me, to the thing that I came from. Why would I want to leave anything to him? He doesn't want to take responsibility for what he has here. Now, I'm not saying that in an angst way, but I'm saying that truthfully. I'm not going to leave anything to him. This person's not going to do anything. This creation, so to speak, is not going to do anything for me. It doesn't even do anything for me. Why would I leave anything to him? No, thank you. He'll take care of his own deeds of doing nothing for us continually, and that's all right. Pretty much, he's just as ignorant as the people in power doing it for themselves. As the mental state of most people is that, oh no, the government can't do that, they're not that smart. Okay, well, if you believe people are incompetent, at that level of power, incompetence does not mean that you can't do something bad to people. Incompetence actually enhances the value of doing something bad to people. Why do you think people watch Jackass and all the shows that are on now? Because they like people seeing getting hurt. What do you think these people in power are doing? The same exact thing. Only on a grander scale, of course, but same exact thing. They love seeing people get hurt, die, and so on and so forth, just getting their way. Anybody who gets in their way will be put away in more ways than one. And that's the circumstances of our lives, correct? If I'm incorrect, please evaluate the judgments, that I'm not making any judgment. There's no judgment call to make on this. Now I could call it a judgment. You know, anything I've said is based on reportable evidence of life experiences, not any circumstances. Because circumstances were built way before I got there, or way after I got there, because now I remember them. But I don't think there were circumstances that really happened. It was more that not taking responsibility, not wanting to deal with honesty, and just saying it. That's not a circumstance. That's somebody, how they live. You know, that's not a circumstance. They don't want to deal with anything, so there's no circumstances for them. That's the whole point, you know. There's only I think circumstances can work, but they'll only work for people who actually want to take responsibility for stuff, you know. I take responsibility for stuff I didn't even need to take responsibility for, but I liked it, you know. I was the bad guy once too. It was fun, you know. It was a fun thing, but it's nothing that I find like value in. There, I'll say it, and I think it's true. It's not more that I find value in myself there. It doesn't matter. It's great that I can be that person for somebody. But I don't have a chain on me. You know, I don't have a chain on me like if I were a punching bag or something. I don't have a chain on me that, you know, if somebody punched me and treated me like a punching bag, would keep me there. You know, like let's say I'm a punching bag right here, standing right here. Somebody punches me. There's no chain on top, let's say, for example. Let's say maybe it's just standing on its own, maybe invisible, maybe floating or something. But I'm kidding around, but hit right there, I just go back. That's it. And they're like, Marcello, asshole! But it's not really that. It's just that I just can't do it. You know, it's more that there's nothing of value in being treated like that. And they should know that they were done in like that many times. And I think that's what I've learned between what happened with my ex, because I saw that that's what happened. That as long as she couldn't have an abusive relationship, she's going to start it herself. But I can't be there for that, you know, because she knows how bad it was for her. So for her not to even understand that, I just got to go, you know. It's true, you know. I mean, nobody else can tell her. It's true, you know. All she can do is tell me. Like, if she's not fulfilled, has to say it, you know. But she didn't want to. She wanted me to take the responsibility for her not being happy. But, you know, if I'm not making her happy, that's my fault. I can't be responsible for not making her happy. If I'm not making her happy, that is my fault. So I've already taken that fault, technically. But she has to say she's not happy. You know, there's no way she can continue unless she does. And I think that's the whole point between what I saw with what this honesty and truth is and everything, is that it does come from the fact that most people don't want to take the responsibility and don't want to say things. But they always want to leech it off of somebody else or put it on somebody else. Like being comfortable, like people confusing that being comfortable is being happy. But it's not. It's not the same thing at all. Being comfortable is basically like all these things about, you know, not dealing with honest truths, not being truthful with yourself. These are things that people run at all the time. And so because of that, it makes it to be that my reason too, that those are not necessarily both sides of the picture, but there are no both sides. There's a ton, you know. That's when I say, like, you know, there's 2 doors to go through. No, there's not. There's more than 2 doors to go through. There's only 2 doors if you want there to be only 2 doors. But there's no line in the sand. The thin line is gone. And the box has never been there. But I think that's what really is, like, creating this whole thing, like God is being a tool for persecution. You know, like, people use it for convenience a lot. You know, especially not dealing with something directly. They use God in some form or another as a convenience. And that's bad, you know. And I think for the enlightening qualities of, you know, powerful acceptance, which you should already have on your own. But I think that's the problem right there, is that if you don't have the acceptance on your own, a lot of people just shelter it and use it through somebody else. And that's why they won't take responsibility and say, leave it to God. Because they don't want to take responsibility for what they did right or wrong, or what they did for themselves, and their intention kind of holds them back. But no matter what, they have to learn from their intentions. I think a lot of times the way religion has been used, the way people think of God and everything else, inhibits people from growing. It doesn't help people grow because it makes you consistently forget about yourself and only remember God. But there's a difference. If we're created, that means that we have to take responsibility for what we're doing too. And that means that if we're always thinking about what can happen next, and God, then we'll never think about what we're doing next. We'll never think about how we're acting next. We'll always think about, well, God. And that's it. We'll never think about anything else. And we'll forget about everything else that's around us, and we can't do that. There's a big difference. I'm not saying you have to hold on to this physical life or whatever. I believe in the spiritual too, a lot more. But to be transfixed on the appeal of what somebody else can do for you, something else can do for you, helps to make problems with everybody. Because you're not going to only do it with God then. You're going to create an image of man just as harshly. An image of man or woman or anybody else that you know. That you'll have expectations for, that you have high standards for. All these things will continually come at you, fall flat in your face, and you'll kill it. Because you don't want to deal with the idea that somebody can't fulfill your wishes. So, I'm one of those people who are honest. And will not just act insufferably when told something honestly. It doesn't mean I don't react. It just means I won't react to a point where I'm like, this is a surprise. More I'd act like, can you give an answer why? Can you give an answer why you used it in that way? Why you didn't answer for yourself? That's why no good deed goes unpunished, because maybe that's the punishment. That people don't want to answer that. That the punishment is that, I'm not going to answer that, no way, Marcello. And people being comfortable with it. And not being happy. And I can't make them happy. If they're happy with comfortability, they're not going to be happy with happiness. And that tool of persecution, leave it to God. Leave it to God. There's only one problem with that. If you leave everything to God, there's nothing else left for you. So take care, all. Love.